Lauren, for some reason, skipping the instructions of the show that we normally do when we have a guest. So the first 30 minutes to an hour, we will talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Until we don't.
Okay.
Right, until we just speak over you to the point that no one can hear what you're saying, which could be minutes from now.
Right.
So it'll be good for you to introduce yourself and Condo-World, and then we are happy to move into whichever topics you'd like to start with.
Okay. That sounds good. Well, first off, thank you so much, everybody, for having me today. I've watched the show over the years and very excited to be a part of the group. It's always a lively discussion, so hopefully I can bring a good topic to the table. Just to give a little bit of background on who I am and who Condo-World is. I'm CMO for Condo-World. We are a vacation rental management business based in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We've been in North Myrtle Beach for 35 years and represent the largest selection of oceanfront condos in the destination. We recently purchased one of our largest competitors in the area, Condo-Lux, and that kind of segues into where the technology piece of this comes into play. Over the years, we've kind of set ourselves apart amongst our competition, kind of locally and nationally, I'd say, in that we've built almost all of our tech stack. So our property management system, our website, our booking engine, our operational tools, our revenue management piece. We have our own kind of quasi version of a channel manager. And all these things are continuously being revised and tweaked to perform better based on what our needs are at the time. And having that approach has really allowed us to do some cool things. Condo-World, when we were first founded 35 years ago, our owner, Roy Clyburn, his vision was not to just rent North Myrtle Beach forever, but he wanted to use the name Condo-World to book other destinations because it is a very global sounding name. So with technology, we've been able to figure out a way to do that. We represent our 500 plus units in this area, but we also book reservations through our website, condo-world.com, for partner resorts, both south of us in Myrtle Beach, as well as in other destinations in Florida, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Orlando, and Hilton Head. So we've been able to do that because the flexibility we have on the technology side. We've got 3 in-house developers, marketing, IT team that are all right on the same floor as me. So it makes it nice to be able to have those assets at our disposal. As we continue to grow, we start seeing the same trends in terms of the complexities and the issues that we're facing, as well as our partners face and other vendors in the market face, which these days mostly are related to API connectivity and the lack of standardization. And, I think we've kind of hit that tipping point of most companies realize now that, they need to be more open about it. I mean, if you're a software company that doesn't want third-party companies to come in and be able to access your clients, you're really just putting yourself in a basically a death cycle, because both whether you're hotels or vacation rentals, if you're a property management company, your clients need to be able to access the different services that are out there. But we've run into a lot of different things in this process, and right now we're at a kind of a stale point in some of our markets, because one of our major suppliers of inventory, V12, which is HomeAway software, is being sunsetted. And that was our core integration for out-of-market stuff. And, we've got partners just dropping off like flies because they're now finding new solutions. So we're at a point now where we're trying to decide what's going to be our next integration that we do to pick up inventory in these other areas. And it's interesting. There's really is the lack of standardization has been complicated to figure out how we bring these new APIs in and how we get the right partners. We don't want all the inventory. We want the right inventory, but we also need to have the right integrations that are going to be able to be maintained and good for the long haul. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I don't know where a good starting point is to bring others into the discussion, but.
So Alex, at what point in Condo-World's history did you guys decide you had to just take matters into your own hands? What really led you down the path of wanting to add the focus of having your own technical stack at the core of your business plan?
Yeah, so our property management system was developed, probably the first version of it, 20 years ago, I'd say. Our CTO worked part-time for Condo-World for many years before coming on full-time. And that was really, that came from our owner, Roy, who, we used to use Property Plus. That's an old system that's been retired or sunsetted. But he said to Mitch, who had done some stuff for us, he said, can you build something similar? And Mitch is brilliant. He said, yes, I think I can build this. And, those are the famous line, or the famous words we always hear around here, like, yeah, we can do that. We can probably do it pretty well. And turns out did it very well. So, we're at a point where, we're considering taking it to market too. And we've had a lot of interest from our partners that understand the value of having a property management system that was designed by property managers, not by outside tech companies that aren't connected to the hows and whys of things are done. So long answer to your question. Probably we've always been like that since I've been here. I've been with Condo-World for 10 years, but it was at least 20 years ago that we started building our own stack.
Awesome. So while you were talking, we added a couple dozen more people. So say hello to Stuart Butler from Fuel Travel.
Yeah, I feel like we've met once or twice, Alex.
Hey, Stuart.
And Mr. Tim Peter from Tim Peter and Associates.
Hi, nice to meet you, Alex. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
So Alex has been a little humble there when she's talking about why they started the software stuff. I've known her for a long time and known the company. And when she started, I mean, they've always been culturally a great company. But what Alex brought to the table and what the team has is the scrappiness and a can-do attitude that not a lot of companies have. Like, they're willing to look at a problem and not just accept it as being a roadblock. They'll say, hey, here's a problem. How do we solve it? How do we solve it? Not how do we go find someone else to solve it for us, but they'll take it on. And that's really how they've become a market leader in the Myrtle Beach area and beyond. So it's just a really cool spirit that they have within their company.
If I might chime in and say a little bit that one thing that was when Stuart first talked about Alex coming on, and the excitement I had from having first talked with Alex was they were one of the few that actually took upon themselves the internalization of the technology collaboration of actually trying to create the solution themselves. One of the early topics and one of the pre-things we did on LinkedIn Live yesterday was talk about the fact that most companies are doing off-the-shelf pulls, and then they're trying to figure out how those off-the-shelf pulls on technology can somehow plug into something else. Where uniquely Alex has gone in and said, and from her team side, saying, how can we build our own solution by creating our parameters of demand and then going out and having that created in collaboration with what we need to collaborate with. So she's like the canary in the coal mine. She's first to see when something isn't going to be working or when there's these resistance points in these sandboxes of proprietary, this is us, not you stuff that's coming up. And as you mentioned, we have this problem now. We're sunsetting this, and now we're finding out that getting these things to work together again. Everybody's scattering to the winds about this kind of stuff. Is this the only way we're ever going to solve technology? Do you think that we have to buy off the shelf stuff, or is there still hope that we can, with what Alex is doing, internalize it to a point where they can create the core and then create the data layering necessary? Like Happy or something that can talk to other stuff. Since we see that emerging into the market now, where these software solution interfaces are coming to market and saying, oh, we'll plug the dots. We'll put the things together and see if they can collaborate.
And there are other people in the market doing it. Folks like, I think Robert talked about it in one of the articles that he sent out, the trends with Citizen M, where they've kind of created their own proprietary bus and people are connecting to it. So I think there's an element where certain companies are going to take more ownership and control over that central piece and then bolt on what they need.
It really depends. Yeah, it depends on what the company's strategy is, right? So a proprietary build doesn't work for everyone. So it may work for certain types of companies that are closely held or of a certain size. But it's not going to work for everyone, and it shouldn't, right? We shouldn't just come down the side of one or the other. Off the shelf has its value proposition. So does your own build, right? Your own build, you control your own destiny. Except, God forbid, your CTO gets hit by a bus, right? Is there someone is there, I mean, then you may be constrained by intellectual knowledge inside your own company. So it really, so it just depends. I think the better or the more interesting conversations from my background anyway is regardless of if you do off the shelf or proprietary, how do you connect them? Right. So how do you talk to each other? And because that way, if we could figure out some way to do that, then it doesn't really matter what your company's tech stack strategy is.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And ideally, and what is interesting about Alex's world is it has its own sub ecosystem. The vacation rental management industry has its very specific needs that has sprouted up this ecosystem of technology specialized in that. And some of the challenges they're seeing in their world is who owns those technologies is sometimes a bit problematic to where you're getting into bed with someone who's, their general interests are not aligned with serving that technology to be the best technology. They just want you on it because they want you in their distribution.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, all the emerging ones like tours and activities are struggling with that exact same thing with their own really unique subculture of providers where the OTAs want that tours and activities content, and just because they want it doesn't mean that they're going to present that content in a way that best serves tours and activities operators. As an example, right?
Very true. Two aspects to this, and not that it says Holly Zova, but Dan Waxman is on that high level of integration of technology. One of the fortes that he does with his company is walk in and say, how can I make what you want solved work with what is out in the market to create? He's very, very fluid in that. And then with Stephanie, her interest, she has to deal with the disparities of brand, where a brand tries to bring to market those very things that we say are all integrated, but in fact, they're very segmented. So, from their perspectives, they have some neat things to look at. It's from our struggles on the outside world to the struggles on the inside world, I guess.
Yeah.
And to just, before we off ramp on the build versus buy, and something you really do have to consider is the commitment to build. It's not the first build. The first build is the easiest. You can get your first build if you're good within budget and within time frame. That's not where the work is. The work is actually upkeep and continued improvement and things like that. And that's a commitment. You actually have to commit budget, R&D
every year,
resources.
Year over year, that's right.
You are now not just a whatever company you are, you're also a tech company.
That's right.
Yeah,
exactly right. Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to want to proprietize everything. I don't make that word up, say even the word, but make everything proprietary to yourself. I think that's
proprietarized. That sounds like a Lornism.
Proprietized, I don't think that ever makes sense, right? Because you're never going to be all things for all solutions. But I think where Alex's group has done really well is they've identified the things that were creating friction points across all of their partners and try to solve those specific problems with, and the PM, I'm not saying every property group should go build their own PMS, but they had unique situation with the types of inventory they had where they didn't have another option that would allow them to evolve with the strategy that they were looking at, where they were becoming, a pseudo OTA, really. In that connectivity was their biggest limitation and still is for them with a lot of the partners that they're trying to bring on board because they're using legacy PMSs that just don't let the data be available. So I think, would I advise someone to go and try to do it all? Probably not, because then companies like Fuel and Nor1 wouldn't exist, right? We have a best-in-breed product that is always going to be better than them because we can split the cost across a few hundred or thousand people and make a better end product. But when you're in a unique situation and when you're trying to solve a specific problem and it does align with your strategy, then it may make sense at least to evaluate. But you're right, there's challenges from personnel challenges and upkeep challenges and what is the real true cost of it challenges. So
I have a question from Ty in Ireland to Alex as to what was the genesis of your decision?
Well, I mean, from the property management side, we've had our software, like I said earlier, for probably at least 20 years that we've been on RPM, which was developed in-house. But I mean, really in recent years, as we've expanded as a regional marketing channel for our partners, that, we had to be able to build those elements ourselves. And, we could have kept it limited to, okay, we just have our property management system. That's the only thing we develop in-house. And then our website and everything else is done out of house. That would make sense if we weren't trying to accomplish the things that we're trying to accomplish. So we call ourselves a hybrid OTA, which, we're in between being a property management company, but also being a booking site for our properties as well as our partners. Another way I like to describe it is this side of the company is a startup within a grown-up organization. So we have that, as Stuart alluded to, kind of that scrappy mentality of, if we see something, we want to try and build it ourselves, while still being mindful of there are definitely things that we don't need to mess with building ourselves. Sometimes and many times there's things people can do better that can complement our efforts. But that's what we're trying to do is not really. There's a lot of companies out that are trying to do something similar. And Marriott, for example, Marriott's Homes and Villas program that they've just rolled out this year is very similar to what we're doing. Marriott has contracted with specific vacation rental companies to be able to offer really high-end luxury rentals to their Bonvoy members. And they did that because they don't have vacation rentals, they have hotels. So we've done the same thing. We don't have condos and resorts in Panama City or Myrtle Beach. We're just in North Myrtle Beach. But we know, based on our customer base, that we have a demand for that kind of inventory. And, we've set up partnerships under the same auspices. And I like what Marriott has done with that too, because it's similar to our perspective on it, that not everybody can go work with Marriott. Not everybody can go work with Condo-World. For right now, a lot of the issues why people can't work with us is for API connectivity in their software. But beyond that, we don't have a sales team that's out there. It's me going and talking to partners, making those relationships, but finding the right relationships. That's really important. We've built this as a pure OTA that really wants to do a good job for the right partners and not go out there and just try and compete with Expedia.
Now, to be fair to Alex too, though, is although they may not have a big sales team, whenever she's in a market prospecting, it's like a tidal wave through that market. I get phone calls like, "Do you know an Alex at Condo-World?"
Stephanie, go ahead.
I'm curious as to what your distribution strategy is and the mentality, and how does the technology support that distribution strategy?
For our properties that we manage.
Yeah.
So we our main channel that we distribute to is VRBO for our North Myrtle Beach inventory, and we are directly connected to VRBO. That's definitely been something that has been huge for us. That's one thing we've learned in the API connectivity world too, is when you're trying to do a connection to VRBO, if you have somebody in the middle or to any channel, the middleman normally ends up being where the problems lie. So the more direct connections we can set up, that's where we're trying to go. We'd love to get a direct connection with Airbnb, but that is, not easy. They are not letting anybody, I guess, get in on any more APIs for at least until Q4. And my joke with Stuart is, when people start talking with queues, it's nowhere close in terms of the roadmap. So. But yeah, so we directly connect to VRBO. We do use 2 channel managers. We have all sorts of problems with them, and it ends up being, in most cases, more work than it's worth it on the booking side. So that's kind of where we're at.
So what kind of do you have, and how much business comes from like VRBO versus like your direct website? And you don't have to answer that.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to answer it, but it's going to sound probably very, very different than hotels. So we are 95% direct, 5% OTA. I wish we were higher than that, but not high like some of the partners that we hear. I mean, when we go down to Florida, I hear from similar companies that are similar size to Condo-World that their OTA business is 30% of their revenue, 30-40% of their revenue. I would like us to be closer to that 10% mark because that obviously offsets our advertising costs. And VRBO is a great channel for us. And likewise, VRBO and Condo-World are very similar, that we attract the same kind of guests. We attract guests that book further in advance, that they stay longer, they book further in advance, they pay a little bit higher. They're typically larger families looking for larger units. And so, that side of it for our partners is also a very good thing too.
Dan, go ahead. I'm sorry. You were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that something that Alex mentioned about the connectivity and getting the direct connects, and back to the build versus buy discussion that we had a couple of seconds ago, is that, over the past probably 10 years or so, that question has gotten a lot more difficult because of the complexity of building your own these days. Everything, we live in a world of APIs now that wasn't quite as big as it was 5-10 years ago.
Right.
Things like GDPR, all these regulations that come up that you have to manage for.
Yeah.
The complexity of building it on your own, it's much more difficult now.
Yeah.
So making that decision, when you start a company 10, 20 years ago, you needed to build a technology that was right for you, that worked for your niche.
Right.
You say that though, Dan, because from a technology standpoint, it's actually easier. The barrier to entry is lower because you don't need to buy server infrastructure. There's a lot of frameworks out there. So to get an MVP, like a minimum viable product, launched today is infinitely cheaper and easier and quicker than it was 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
I can attest to the difference. I mean, Flip2 has cost a fraction to develop that Easy Yield cost, and Flip2 does quite a bit more functionally than Easy Yield did, and a lot of that is there is much better infrastructure available, and I'll also say where it becomes problematic on building anything is you have to become a specialist in a lot of things that are not core to your business, like what you're talking to.
That's where it gets more complicated.
I did not grow up wanting to have an expertise in PCI certification, but unfortunately, because I owned Easy Yield, I had to become a specialist in PCI. GDPR and other privacy laws, anyone who's building technology or dealing in communications in general has to have a specialty in that. Whereas if you're buying off the shelf, your level of knowledge that you need to have in those issues is a much smaller scope. So, I mean, I agree with what you're saying on hurdle-wise on what you need to know from a specialty standpoint. But I will say, to Stuart's point, infrastructure is just far easier today. Like anyone that's building modern communication platforms no longer have to host their own mail. Like that was such a bear to host anything that had anything to do with email.
But Dan had a question that we didn't get to.
Sorry,
I gotta learn to sharpen my elbows for this call here. I think that the whole thing is, to me, is I agree with everything that Ed said, and it's in many ways a lot easier, but in other ways a lot harder. I think the challenge is when you start to scale it, it works, right? So you have Nor1, you have an Airbnb or whatever it is, they build their own systems and they get it at scale so that they get the attention that they need of partners that they need to connect to. Like Alex was mentioning, getting a direct connect to a certain partner may not be possible. You try building a new technology the other day, put one bells on it and ask Google to connect to you. No way, right? You have to do a channel manager or something else. So the question is, how far are you going to scale this thing up to be able to have the leverage to work with everybody out there? And I guess my question, Alex, is what is your growth plan, and
I think so.
How do you look at that in terms of scaling so that you can maintain technology and grow the technology?
Yeah, so I touched on this earlier, and I don't think I finished where we're going with it, but we just acquired Condo-World, which is one of our largest competitors for the past 35 years. And one of the things that made this a very attractive acquisition for us was because they used our software. So, there's a lot of acquisitions going on within vacation rentals right now. And the main pain point that you hear whenever you talk to somebody who's acquired a company is the transition from getting the units off the previous software that they're on, because they're normally never on the same, and getting them into the new software. And that workflow can take many months, to be honest. So Condo-World was on RPM. It was literally as simple as changing the database connection to have their units on our site. So you couldn't have asked for a more seamless transition in that case. So that's definitely been a way that we've leveraged the technology that we didn't know that this was coming down the pipeline, but when it did, gosh, it worked really well. So in the future, that's that's something that we'll consider too. I mean, we might eventually go out of market and look for other partners on the software side, perhaps even on the acquisition side. We might leverage those two things together in a way that it makes sense that we can, work with partners to get their properties on our site as well as VRBO, hopefully Airbnb someday too, and dial them in on the website and other areas as well.
I would like to ask a perspective question, if I may, one from Kat and the other from Stephanie. From Kat's perspective, because you're with Alhoa, you seem to have an overarching communications with what the industry participants are within your organization. I mean, hearing what Alex has been talking about and those choices, I know that a lot of your representation and this is brand related, and that brings me into the Stephanie conversation of it as well. How are these discussions comparing to what discussions you're hearing? Is it something that you're hearing rumblings of people that are brand connected that are looking at alternatives? Is that even coming into dialogue? And then Stephanie, from your perspective, from what Alex is looking at, how is brand looking at balancing what they're doing in comparison to what they know is being done outside of their brand relationships with their industry? So I'll ask Kat first if she can kind of give some insights of what she's hearing or not hearing in relationship to all that.
I apologize. I stepped away for a moment from what I did hear. Yes, we constantly have a conversation on the technology aspect and marketing from our members and what is coming. I'll tell you, it's a very popular topic right now of what is anticipated for 2020 and thinking outside the box. One of the things I had written down for Alex to comment on was I was curious what your average length of stay is with the properties that you all oversee and how your marketing differs. Most of our members are in that transient space. I've definitely have folks with the extended stay properties that look at long-term stays, but the marketing tools and strategies and technology that we typically recommend doesn't always gear towards that type of stay. So in a way, I don't have as much information on what conversations are having with their brands. I know that from what we have heard is there's a constant push to evolve and take on new technologies to make things better from the guest angle. I'm just not sure what that looks like with the execution side. So with that, let me ask that, Alex, what type of average stay do you all see, and like how does your marketing tailor to that?
Right. So if you look at our company as a whole, we're a 5-night average. We do in the winter months, we do monthly rentals from November through March, just in North Myrtle Beach with our properties. But for the most part, our core business model in North Myrtle Beach is still traditional vacation rental market. It is June through August, Saturday to Saturday, 7-night stays, and actually. That is part of how our first attempt at going out of market got started. So probably about 6-7 years ago, Myrtle Beach really came on the map with some development they did downtown with a new boardwalk and skywheel. And there was just a ton of attention and marketing dollars being spent on Myrtle Beach. And we've always advertised ourselves as Myrtle Beach. The way that our owner always says is, if you're going to New York, or if you're going to the Bronx, you don't say that you're going to the Bronx, you say you're going to New York. And that's kind of how we look at North Myrtle Beach. For a long time, people didn't know North Myrtle Beach, they know Myrtle Beach. So we've advertised as such. And, this is 5-6 years ago, kept hearing people, they want to stay less than 7 nights. They want to be down by the boardwalk. They want to be central Myrtle Beach. And we had nothing down there. So we reached out to one of the larger resort groups in the area and said, let's figure out a way to work together. And, one thing I will say about our destination, and I know Ed and Stuart can attest to this, we have a very collaborative nature in the Myrtle Beach area. A lot of us work together on chamber-related CVB issues and projects, and that's really brought people together to come to the table to realize, especially now, we're not competing against each other. We're competing against Expedia and VRBO and Airbnb. Where it's not just each other anymore. So that being said, our length of stay overall 5 days.
Very good. With the marketing and how it's tailored, is it more talking about the experience? Are you finding any other trends that kind of surprised you to actually gain the business?
Yeah, I mean, definitely experience based. So we have a pretty solid mix of marketing. mostly digital. We also still am in the middle of proofing our 50-page brochure that gets mailed to 75,000 homes at the end of this month. But for the most part, we are, totally digital. But yeah, the experience is important. In our case, I think showing the accommodations is also very important, especially because, I think that can be hard to show a hotel room and really make it, if it's just a traditional hotel room, that great to show. But in some of our condos, when you're talking, we filmed a video this weekend in a 7-bedroom penthouse that, it's just unreal. It rents for $25,000 a week, on a low week. So you want to be able to show that in your marketing and advertising. And we definitely have a good mix of both showing the lifestyle, the experience, the tours, activities, but also showing the accommodations, because that's, they are a destination unto themselves in some cases.
I want to answer Lauren's question, but do you struggle with the consistency piece of it? Like different owners having different levels of up to, keeping things current, and then like the reviews part of it, like the consumer feedback. Do you struggle with the piece of it consistent wise?
Yeah, absolutely. So, all of our units that we manage, obviously they are individually decorated. We service them, maintain them, but they are individually owned, obviously. And we have certain levels of quality that we expect. And, we cross that bridge many times and have over the years, that if an owner's not keeping their unit maintained, if they're not keeping up with having the best furniture and flat screen TVs and technology and everything, then in most cases we do let them go. And because if you don't, we get bad reviews, and then that just brings down the entire company. So the reviews are definitely a complicated side of the business, for sure. And there's some things you can't make your owners redecorate all their condos, but you can show them the ways that people are succeeding and the things that they're doing to get the most bookings. So that's what we try to do.
I'm just listening because I'm drawing these parallels, especially with something Ed said earlier about how the brands, it's easy to look back now and say shoulda, woulda, coulda, like in terms of, you look at Marriott having Marsha, and then each of the brands having their own PMS, and IHG trying to switch over and go into Opera and try to just outsource that. And there's all these different moving pieces. But as I look at how the brands, and I have probably more insight to some than others, but, IHG, when they were looking at changing over to Concerto, like the spaghetti model of all the different APIs, you're talking about, it was something like in the hundreds of systems that they had been connecting with, and trying to fix that silly string model was a super huge challenge. And I think that's why, Marriott still has Marsha and Fosse. So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do need to apologize for all the questions that are coming up in the chat. I'm trying to surmise them by asking the individual, the host to go over them, because we are getting some very specific questions, and I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes with Alex. And I know that we have short time with Kat and stuff like this. So later, if we spend more time, we'll be able to come back to more specific ones. But there are some generalizations, and usually they're leaning towards like parallels between brand versus independent hotels versus long-term stays. Whoop. Somebody hit a button. Here, we'll go back and do this again. There we go. Somebody hit a button. Anyway. Well, it's better than Ed. Ed usually just pre-starts the show and be like, oh, hey, we're here. So we're all good for that. But anyway, so I'll try to surmise some of the questions to it, but most of them are generalized towards the categorization of our industry. And you represent a very unique function to it in comparison to a competition, to something that we don't know have a direct competition to. So that seems to be where some of the most questions come from, is to what Kat's asking you. Lengths of stay. How do you get to these people? What are you talking about? How do you keep all the cats herded in one direction with consistency of inventory? How does that compare to brands that are trying to get in your space? One that we haven't really hit, that I know that Tim probably will chime right up on, is this whole new development of how now software services are trying to offer this integration of awareness for the Airbnb inventory, the very VRBO inventory, as a part of their strategies. I had 3 people comment on the fact that they're being hit up with, and to name names, TravelClicks hitting them up with this new interface that allows them to see, Airbnb inventory within their systems. There's 2 other systems that, offer the same thing. They're creeping into your space, so to speak. In a way, hotels are looking to compare themselves to what you're doing now. Mm-hmm. To see how they can get inventory that usually would come to your direction for what you're doing. How can they pull that back into what inventory they think they can offer for the space? Granted, it's not going to be exactly the same, but neither is Airbnb. You have multi-room and you have single room. So how are you guys, are you seeing that as a potential threat, I guess, as a way of surmising some of these questions? Are you seeing this, that hotels are getting smarter at how they can how they can begin to market against what you're offering?
No, honestly, I think it's a good thing. I think everybody at the end of the day needs to realize that whether you're a destination or a property, your guests aren't always going to want to come back there every single year. I mean, they're going to want to go different places. They're going to stay different places. And you've got to be flexible. If you have a strong guest history and a strong following and a company that's good at the core elements of marketing, revenue management, and call center, then, the world's your oyster. You can book other places. And that's always been the way that we've looked at it. Where our position is a little bit unique because our name lends itself to being able to book other places. If we were Husner Vacation Rentals, that doesn't necessarily,
It still works.
well, nobody can pronounce it. So right there.
Well, no, only Lauren can.
Just Lauren.
Only
One
Lauren.
customer.
But I mean, Condo-World obviously is a brand that can extend outside of Myrtle Beach. Doesn't even need to be Myrtle Beach. So that's a consideration there. But I think it's great. I think if hotels can find other ways to partner with other resorts or destinations and make it work for them, I think that's great.
So you never will foresee it like integrating with Expedia or any other larger OTA from a distribution strategy standpoint?
No, we use Expedia, but and we'd like to do a direct connection with them as well. We use Lexicon as a channel manager. We've used Red Awning. We've used Booking Pal. There's several we've looked at, but I mean, really what we're leaning towards is further building out our own in-house channel manager. So we've got VRBO and then adding those channels onto it too. We've definitely found, and I know Expedia, Booking.com are huge for several of our partners in this market. Neither channel has really worked that well for us, which I know is completely different also than the hotel you guys all work.
Yeah.
But it hasn't caught on. And I think, we really understand vacation rentals very well. We also understand how to categorize them and be able to show key level units, inside level units in a way that makes sense. I don't think Expedia and Booking have been able to figure out how to do that well. I
don't think they want the overhead, right? I mean, they're not. I don't think they want to allocate the real estate, the digital real estate. They would need to be able to show the value proposition of one of your units versus a differently decorated unit. I mean, that's just not. They commoditize hotels.
Right. They want a double. They want a king.
That's
want. Yeah, exactly.
And that's what you don't want is you don't want your product commoditized, because if you do, you lose your value proposition.
Right. Exactly.
Tours and activities are struggling with exactly the same thing vis-a-vis Expedia and Booking.com.
And Alex had talked on a part of our marketing, and I know we always end up focusing on digital, but we did kind of skim over. They do a really good vacation guide that's really well designed, and because of their business, they actually have lots of content.
There's little tabs up there.
It was actually, I think this is a note from Alex to us. Yeah. So yeah. So this is the Condo-World 2019. I haven't gotten the 2020 yet.
Yes, it works right now.
But I will say, their idea on design and getting to what really matters on different properties is what more businesses need to look at. And of course they do this well on digital, but we always talk about digital. I thought I'd help Alex brag on their physical marketing.
This is this week in hospitality digital.
Yeah.
No, it isn't. We dropped the digital.
We dropped the digital.
We dropped the digial. Yeah,
You weren't here that week.
Then
why the hell am I here? I don't know about anything other than
We always ask that question, Tim.
yeah, harsh but fair.
I found it impressive that you still have a print brochure. Actually, that means that you have stats that show that there's still business, a substantial amount of business coming from it.
Yeah, it's amazing. People say that every year. They're like, "Gosh, I mean, it's crazy. You guys can still print that many copies of a book that is that big and takes so long to produce." But the way that we track it, we've got a unique phone number on it, and obviously that's not Well, we do have some unique URLs in it, I guess, but it's mostly tracking just based on the phone number. So if somebody goes just straight to our direct type in of our URL, we're not even catching that business. And the return on it is just, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's.
But part of this too, and you can't really undersell it, it's because you can tell they put a ton of effort into it. Like if you were looking at what I'm looking at here, I mean, the quality of content, the descriptive content on it, like they're not phoning this in. This is obviously a lot of work. And so it actually adds value. If I was looking to take my family on a trip, I actually perusing this is fairly easy to quickly understand where I want to take my family. And, that if you're still serving need, not through digital, you will continue to have success through that type of channel.
I think about too. I mean, direct mail is used to be a thing of the past, but I do think it's coming back in a way. And I know for myself, around Christmas time, when I start getting catalogs, I get excited about getting them, and then I'll put them on the living room table, and I will read them later at night when I've got time. Like I look forward to reading catalogs now, so because you don't get them as much anymore. I mean, I get a million emails a day, but I actually look forward to catalogs, and I'll flip the pages. And I hope that's how people feel when they got our vacation guide too. But it's a big homeowner piece for us too. I mean, that makes our homeowners proud that they see that these are distributed everywhere in our destination and sent all over the world. That their units are out there and being seen. And back 10 years ago, everybody in our market did those big brochures. And I think we're one of the last that still do it. But the numbers justify the reason for it. So we're not going to stop until it turns. So
and it's great for inspiration. That's the key, because if it's well designed, people can look through it and get ideas, be inspired. I mean, Tim used to work for Leading Hotels of the World, that Leading Hotels directory or preferreds directory, which is distributed in each of their properties, and in that case, around the world.
And if I could jump in for 1 second on that, Robert, and I wanted to ask Alex a question about this. One of the things that we found really valuable with the guide, with the directory at Leading specifically, was they were in every room. They weren't just at every property; they were in every room. So when people were just sitting there, is that what you're doing with the guide as well? Are these distributed in property as well? Are they distributed in the the individual units, or is it only mail? And if so, why? What makes that the case, right?
So they're not in the rooms, but we do have them in our office, and we get a lot of walk-in business, people that are here and they're staying somewhere else, but they want to figure out where they're going to stay the next time they come, so they'll come in and grab a couple copies. For in-room is tough because we've got 500 condos that are mixed between 80 different buildings. So it's hard enough once a year to get our chamber in destination books in there, which we're required to have. To try and replace the magazine every day would be near impossible.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That's great.
And I was going to say too, if you look at the competition in the market, the ones that used to do the brochures, they made the mistake that I think a lot of people do when there's a shift in consumer behavior. So instead of making a decision from an ROI perspective, they just try to diminish what they were producing. So they went from a 50-page book to a 25-page book to a 10 to a 5, and then started saying, well, no, this isn't working for us anymore. When really what they've done is they cut out the value completely to where it wasn't worth doing. Whereas, this is one of the things that differentiates Condo-World is they'll say, if it's worth doing, we're going to do it properly. And to Ed's point, it's a really, really well-produced piece that has a lot of value. And so that coupled, the value coupled with no one else doing it, makes it even more valuable.
Steph, do you have something? I didn't know.
I was just wondering who what your demographic is from an age range and geolocation standpoint, and if that affects the decision making in any of your marketing.
Definitely. So, I mean, our age range, is typically 35 to 45. Women mostly are as the one that books reservation. And I wish I saw it, but women. Location wise, I mean, because now we're in Florida and Tennessee and these other areas, we really cover the whole East Coast where people are coming from. But core markets are pretty standard for Myrtle Beach. Charlotte, Greensboro. Got a lot from Ohio, New York, Pittsburgh, West Virginia, Kentucky. But household income, 75 to 100,000 traditionally.
And again, not to beat the drum of doing things well, as they moved into new markets, they actually added like destination specific selling to talk about why the market is great, why it's a great trip to go to.
Well,
and they have this for each of their new markets.
This is kind of an interesting thing that we learned and stumbled on the way. When we first launched in Myrtle Beach, I mean, we've had a lot of hurdles to get through, and one of them was our homeowners in North Myrtle Beach saying, "Why do you want to rent other people's properties in Myrtle Beach?" Right. And luckily we had that long-term vision to understand that, and we were able to pretty well communicate it, that we see this as a plan to leverage Condo-World to grow in other destinations, to grow our customer base that will come back and stay in North Myrtle Beach. I mean, this is a long-term plan to grow our visibility. But that was a hurdle to come over for sure. As far as the other destinations go, kind of the same thing. We had to also get them to understand, yes, we're booking in Florida now. We're not trying to send all of our guests to Florida. That's not the intent. Like, we want to bring more people into the Condo-World ecosystem that helps all of our partners. And, that goes back to too why we want to work with the right partners. We want to work with the right partners to send our guests to places that we would want to go, that are similar quality or same quality to what we have in North Myrtle Beach. Because if we partner with somebody in Florida and it's just an awful experience for our guests, we get blamed for it. So we've got to be really selective with, not soliciting our brand to a point of, hurting our image.
Overshooting, yeah. I think my first impression when I first found out that you had the printed piece was, I thought it was a very wise thing, considering that there's an ownership perspective to this that is just as much feeding the business as it is the user component of it. We get so caught up on generating business towards driving the rentals that we forget that we need the owners to give the inventory.
Oh, yeah. Our business would not exist without the owners. We don't own any of our
and that age group is one that is more comfortable with sitting back in front of the TV and picking up the catalog off of the table and thumbing through it and go, "This is pretty cool. Maybe we should put our condo in it." And or if they already have their inventory with you, the fact that what's that old commercial, and I'm not only the owner of the company, I'm a customer with Remington or whatever it was, Norelco.
Actually, it was
Sorry, Tim. Didn't mean to do that for you.
As you can tell, Lauren couldn't remember the product because he doesn't need to.
That's what it was. He didn't remember.
Oh, come on, that's a rug. We all know that.
Yeah, but we turn into that self-creating fulfillment that if we exclude, to Stuart's point, if we diminish something because we're not seeing something of it, and we turn it off and we see no real further impact because we've diminished it so much, we think we made the right decision. When in fact, had we actually looked at where all the sources were accurately and gave it its full due, then maybe we would have found, like you did, that it's really a valuable proposition to maintain that type of communication and distribution and so forth. I am surprised you don't have it in the rooms. I see where it is a logistics issue, but I can see where, I would think that it'd be kind of cool that if I actually showed up in one of the condos that I then maybe discovered, even though I am web savvy and found the room because of it, but I'd have something, everybody carries something away. Like, all the reason why the hotels have the Discover the Destination magazine and they end up walking out of the room with it. They want to think that they're going to come back or something. So
yeah, do you hear that, Alex? So Lauren's saying, if he goes and stays at one of your properties,
I'm going to take your magazines.
That's exactly what
It's got the mini bar.
Yeah, exactly.
Chain it to the wall.
One other completely traditional advertising means that we just did this past fall. Also, we did a billboard campaign in market. We've never done billboards before, and the reason that we did that was when we purchased Condo-Lux, we said, okay, homeowners are most likely to visit in the fall. That's when they come and they stay in their condos. And what better way if you are a Condo-Lux owner and you heard that the company was sold, and if you're not familiar with Condo-World for some reason, now that's just further validation of, wow, I mean, I've seen their name everywhere. Like, if somebody tells you that they see you everywhere, that's, you're doing it right. And we've had that comment come in the door several times. The billboards they're coming down this month. I mean, it's not something we wanted to keep long term, but it was a very short, strategic, traditional. I'm sure our competition was looking at it like, why in the world are they doing billboards in market? But there's a reason behind it. So.
And Dan
That's great.
Waxman did a big billboard campaign on between the stretch of water between California and the Hawaiian Islands.
Yeah,
it wasn't as successful.
It didn't work as well as we thought it was. But,
Really difficult ROI.
Yeah.
Hey, I had a quick question on the ownership side. So I've had the pleasure of attending lots of condo owner meetings.
yeah, boy.
Very interesting and fickle group of people.
Oh gosh.
So I mean, what we saw in the market was that they don't always appreciate all that you've done. You guys sound like you do an amazing job on distribution, on marketing, and the non-sexy stuff of cleaning the toilets and making sure they're tables and all of that stuff, which is so important to maintaining the condos and the satisfaction. They don't appreciate it, and then you have these new distribution channels come up that made it seem easy. Oh, I can do this on my own instead of paying them 50%. I can do it on my own, or I can have the real estate agency down the block do it for 20% or whatever it is. Have you seen that dynamic, and have you seen pressure on your splits? I know in the Hawaii market and other markets that I worked in, I've seen a lot of pressure on the ownership splits based on what's happened in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. So to backtrack on an earlier story, when I was first hired at Condo-World, the first project that I was hired for was not what I do now, but, or I guess it kind of is, depending on how you look at it. Our owner wanted to start a website, which was Condo-Worldresorts.com, that was just to promote professionally managed units. And where he was going with that at the time was this was when VRBO had really first started coming up, and we were losing owners that they were saying, okay, I don't need Condo-World or any other rental company. I can do this on my own. And, he was looking at it as, this could be a killer to our industry. Well, fast forward a few years forward, and that's not necessarily the case. I think a lot of owners realize, especially with technology, they can't do it on their own. There's too much to it, both operation and marketing wise. But that was something that we started as a principle of our out of market strategy, was making sure, we don't have individual owners besides our own on our platform. Like, we're not going to go get an individual unit in Panama City. Like, it has to be a professionally managed unit that's part of a partner resort that we work with. But to your question about the margins too, absolutely. I mean, we have several companies in market that they will lead homeowners in and say you can get 0% commission for up to 2 years and different things like that. And it's terrible for our industry and for the market. I mean, we don't do that. We had several owners that were part of Condo-Lux's plan when we bought the company that they were on one of those 0% models that, we're having to go back and explain to them, it's not going to be like that, but here's why. I mean, we are operationally as excellent as we are in marketing. I mean, we really take care of the condos. We have amazing homeowner reps and a reservation team. And, there's a lot that goes into this business that, we need to make at least a fair amount of money because we're doing a lot of work. So just have to be able to justify and really show the value of it at the end of the day.
But what you do, though, Alex, which I think is different than the competition, because there are a lot of people in your market that compete on just that price to the homeowner. It is a 0% for a certain time, or will be 5% less than what you're paying now. But you do something that Tim always reinforces on his podcast, which is when you get into that price war, it's a zero-sum game. You've really got to focus on the product, and I feel like you guys especially do a good job of really trying to justify, and it's succeeding in justifying that you're a better quality product than the competition. So you're not competing on price, you're competing on value, which is always a smarter strategy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
In terms of
questions on
that question, is and this is not a market that I know near as well. In terms of pricing, is that set by the individual condo owners? How does pricing work? And do you have parity issues? Do you have, all those kinds of things? If you could talk about that just a little bit for maybe folks who are less familiar.
Yeah. So back in the day when I first started at Condo-World, we had, I think, 4 rate periods, and the rates were set by, we didn't have a revenue manager. We had a property manager. And between November, like right after Thanksgiving and beginning of December, she closed her door and she set the rates in a spreadsheet, and then and we went for the rest of the year. And believe it or not, that's still how several vacation rental companies, both here and in other markets, still do it. They have 4 rate periods.
Thankfully, hotels never did that, and nobody ever runs their property that way. Never.
They're definitely a lot sooner at changing it, but it really is. It's amazing. Our revenue manager is unbelievable. I mean, he's so good at what he does, and we were one of the first ones vacation rental companies here locally to have a revenue manager. And I mean, the difference that it makes is it's unbelievable. I mean, we've seen our company be able to grow in ways that if we had stayed with those static rate codes, we wouldn't have been able to do things we've done in the last few years. But as far as owners setting their own rates, we don't allow that. I know a lot of companies do, but there's certain things that they can say. So they can say that they don't want to do discounts. In some cases, we'll adhere to that, but really, our revenue manager and property management team has done a great job of explaining to homeowners. It's not about the discount. I mean, if you're going to get more money at the end of the day, then just trust us. Like, this is what we do, and we're making the best decision to get you, one, the right quality guests, that they're going to be better guests. They're not going to tear up your unit, and two, you're going to get more money per booking if you let us do it the right way. So whether it's 10% off or 30% off, if at the end of the day you're getting more money, like, don't worry about what that discount amount is. So
makes sense. All right, very cool. I was just going to chime in for one quick second. Alex, it's a genuine pleasure to chat with you. I actually am flying overseas in a little while, so I'm leaving a little early today, but hope you all have a great rest of the show, and I'll see you in a few weeks.
Yeah, sounds good.
Before you leave, please tell us about Tim Peter & Associates and where they can find you for more information and your amazing podcast.
timpeter.com, timpeter.com/podcast, and I'm on Twitter @TCPeter. Hope you all have a great few weeks. I'm actually not going to be around next Friday or the followings, but see y'all when I'm back when they let me back in the country.
Yeah. Well, we're working on that. Kat, I know you mentioned something about the bottom of the hour as well, but before you left, I want to make sure that we got to talk about it being the month of human trafficking.
Slavery and human trafficking awareness.
So I want to make sure we didn't miss that. So please tell us a little bit about what they're doing. I'm sorry for the pause on it, Alex, but I want to make sure before we lose Alex, Kat, we get to talk about this.
So yes, the month of January is officially Slavery and Human Trafficking Awareness Month. On January 11th, it is Human Trafficking Awareness Day. So this entire month, there's several different organizations, especially those involved with the hotels like HNLA and ourselves, and many of the state lodging associations. There's a huge push on just raising awareness around human trafficking and prevention techniques, what to do if you see something, and this year, more than others, it really does matter, particularly for the hotel owners. There's a huge increase we have seen in lawsuits related to human trafficking and the hotels, be it taking place on property. They aren't training staff. They saw something, didn't say anything, and hotels are getting fined. Some of them, hotel owners are losing their properties, and GMs are also being held accountable along with those on staff. So this month is meant to raise awareness about it and get your staff trained through AHOA itself. We are offering next week, we have a virtual training taking place where we will conduct it over just a live training. Otherwise, we do have an online training available 24/7 for our members and their staff. Last week, we partnered with AHNLA and FRNLA to host an event in I can't remember if it was Orlando or Miami, but our brand new CEO spoke there, and it's actually right before the Super Bowl that will be taking place in Miami too. So there was some other local law enforcement agents and other speakers involved to raise awareness. We are partnering with Vision Hospitality Group to actually do 2 trainings in one day for their staff and any members locally in Chattanooga, close to the Vision Group. And we're also doing a panel with BEST, that's Business Ending Slavery and Trafficking. They're based out of Seattle. Their president and managing director is Mar Bretman. She will be, you know her, right, Lauren? I know you guys have spoken or you've crossed paths at our convention many a time. But she'll be moderating a panel, and the panel will have a local law enforcement agent, a survivor, a GM, or a hotelier, as well as someone on the litigation side. So the idea is just to go beyond just saying, here are the signs and things, but more so say, hey, here's some cases that we've received, and this is what hotel owners or those staff within the hotel have been brought against a lawsuit, and just best practices to learn from, not just the basic nuts and bolts. And it'll be live where you can ask questions to the law enforcement agent or whomever is on the panel. This Fiverr story is always very compelling, so it's something to certainly tune into. Most of these, or actually pretty much all of these events, are set up for AHOA members and their staff specifically. So unfortunately, I can't say everybody come and see it, but on our website, we do have under our advocacy tab, human trafficking prevention, which lays out some more information, some other resources that are available from Department of Homeland Security through BEST and other areas that are completely free that you can access without being an AHOA member. So a lot going on this month. Yesterday was Wear Blue Day, so we took a picture in the office of everybody wearing blue, and we made it a point to do it. I'm sure on LinkedIn there were pictures that were posted from other organizations. But it's a big month, so we just ask folks to continue spreading the word, raise awareness, and just do your part, be a good human.
Do me a favor, Kat, if you can throw some links my way, I'll put them into the show notes for when we distribute the broadcasting. And also, if you want to throw in before you leave one here in the chat or anything like that, please do. But I want to make sure we don't miss that, because it is perfect timing with it being the Super Bowl and so forth. And it is very much newsworthy down here in Florida, because unfortunately events like Super Bowl and those kind of things propagate the issue even greater in the market at the time. So it is well timed in that sense, and appreciate all the efforts for it.
Yeah, and not to mention that's also a high trafficking area for international as well as
lucky
domestic.
us. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Florida is unfortunately a high traffic area for it. Kat, if they want to know more about you and AHOA, where is it they can find you?
So if you want to reach me, you can easiest way, kat.m.speaks@gmail.com. As Lauren mentioned, I'm with AHOA as their Director of Education. You could reach me on the business line. That's my full name, Khatija, as Lauren continues to struggle with.
Kathy.
But it's KATHIJA @AHOA.com. You can check out AHOA.com, AAHOA.com, for more on human trafficking, as well as a plethora of resources specifically for hotel owners and the hospitality industry. So check it out, and I hope to see you all pop up in my inbox so we can continue the conversation.
Awesome. Kat, thank you for your time today. I appreciate that we had you back on the show after a decade.
Right, since last year. And Alex, it was excellent to meet you, and the new talents I haven't spoken alongside before. And I look forward to seeing some of you next week, Friday.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Kat. Appreciate it very much. Alex, thank you. Sorry for the interruption on that. I didn't know if we wanted to continue the conversation the way we had it, or we wanted to drop in something new. Robert has this frowny face, even though it's been his birthday yesterday.
That's just because his skin is loosening.
He has. He just had this frowny, looky face thing going on.
He has resting age face.
No. I realized.
Wow.
I had a bad link on the email on the top story. It went.
Yes, you have to.
Oh, you also had a bad typo, but we weren't going to call that because that's throwing rocks at glass houses.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, I have to have you come back to the show all the time. Never has Ed been so polite, so thoughtful, and so complimentary. It has never happened in 6 years.
If you listen to the stuff I normally end up saying about everything, is that if you're going to do it well. Alex and the Condo-World team are an example of people who take that to heart in the things they do. They care to do it well. So if I'm going to sit here and, give everyone garbage for jumping into crazy stuff and not doing it well, I'm going to do the opposite and help people who actually do things well and put.
I just think he's just being super nice to you, Alex. I'm just,
I very much appreciate it.
Don't be fooled, Alex. Don't be fooled.
She talks to me probably more than you guys do, and so she knows.
Hey, I did want to ask Fallon something in particular in relationship to what Alex has been talking about, and that is, do you see a venue of opportunity for what you do with Nord One in this space? I mean, do you see the ability to say, hey, we have this, but there's this, or let's communicate earlier before you arrive and see if we can expand is there venues of opportunity in this space?
So, Alex, do you have any idea what I do?
Oh no.
I know.
He has a killer walk.
So I work for a company called Nor1, and we serve the hotel industry. So we're a B2B provider, and we provide the ability for hotels to price and present upsells. So at pre-arrival, so on the booking engine, via email, and we also have our front desk upsell product. So for us, I think so. We've been approached by condos and vacation rentals in the past, and the challenge is that the units are so different, right? It's so generally what we do is when we take on a new hotel, we build that hotel's inventory, and we work with the hotel to understand which are their basic rooms and which are their next best rooms, and then what are their junior suites and what are their next best suites, and on up the path, right? And so for a condo or vacation rental, it's hard to be able to say good, better, best, right? I mean, probably there are some buckets, right? You may have categories inside your own inventory categorization. You may have some sort of idea of good, better, best, but of course, no owner wants to think that you consider their unit a base unit or a good unit.
They all think that they're premier, so
right. Right.
Upsell them away from their unit.
My shag carpet is the best shag carpet since the 60s.
Yeah, exactly.
My shag carpet was cleaned last month. The rest of them were cleaned 6 months ago. But it's a good question for Alex. How do you categorize these units, right? If a new customer comes to Condo-World and says, or calls you, how do you say to them, I mean, do you just take in the characteristics of their trip, or how do you manage that?
Yeah, so we've done different things over the years. We've experimented with having different levels of premium units versus economy, and we've used stars. We've used all different ways of doing it, but ultimately that is really hard to maintain because one, I mean, as long as a homeowner has a nice unit and they have flat screens and everything, they might think that their unit is considered a 5-star, but we know based on the decor, it's not going to be as well, adopted by, most people. So it's a little bit too qualitative to pinpoint. That being said, I mean, we price our units based on bedroom size and the building. So our agents know which units are nicer than others, of course. And so we do have an internal rating or scoring system that we use for the units that we know that the homeowners, they are always, updating things and keeping them in tip-top condition. But it's kind of a way of making sure we keep the right inventory too. I mean, we have 3 levels that our agents know the units are in, and if none of our units are bad, but I mean, if they're just they might be a little bit dated, they're not the most modern units. But if our agents aren't booking them, then that also shows the homeowner that if you're not getting reservations, there's a reason.
Right.
I mean,
are most of your reservations voice based?
We are probably 65% online, 35% in-house. So it used to be, I mean,
probably the opposite,
100% phone. But every year that goes further and further online. It's been really interesting since the Condo-Lux acquisition that we thought that most of those bookings that were going to come in, and those people are now rebooking with Condo-World, that those would be the people that would call. And they would have more questions about, well, what are your policies versus Condo-Lux? And most of them are booking online on our website. So kind of the opposite. Our guest history, on the other hand, a lot of them, our repeats call because they like talking to our team. They know them. We have like 0 turnover for our reservation team. The last reservation agent we hired was 5 years ago. I mean, they've all been here for 5, 10, 15 years. So they build those relationships with the guests and with the homeowners, and that's a big part of it.
So an interesting corollary to this is where the hotel industry is thinking about moving, talking about moving. There hasn't been a whole lot of action on it yet, is attribute-based selling, right? Which is, instead of selling by room type, you sell by the attributes of the room. So to your point, if the bedrooms are a little bit bigger, or if there's fireplace, or if there's an ocean view or whatever, right? So it may be that there's opportunity for upselling as we get into inventory that's much more differentiated, like condos and vacation rentals in relation to hotels, that there is opportunity for upselling in those types of really differentiated inventory based on attribute. And that's also hard for a condo owner to argue against, right? Whereas if you say attributes make up the premium, these attributes make up the premium category. And if you don't have these attributes, you can't be in the premium category. That's a much more solid argument for you to be able to maintain that category.
Right.
Then it's much more quantitative than qualitative, to your earlier point.
Right.
And that's really interesting for us. I mean, as a company that manages upselling, we've always taken into account, we've always allowed hotels to upsell by feature. So a feature, so it's really an attribute, but the feature is the room could be bigger, or it could be a better view, or a higher floor, or whatever. And we see the industry kind of coming up along beside us. But it's still, in the hotel industry, there's very little agreement on what actually an attribute is, and then how to define that attribute, and then how to distribute that attribute, right?
Right.
So it's very nascent in the hotel industry.
Do you do consulting for upselling, or do you actually set up? I mean, like you mentioned, tours and activities. Do you partner the resorts with different tours and activity companies, or how does that work?
So right now we are only hotels. So we actually provide the software. So we are basically our revenue management for upsells. So we have data models with algorithms built on top of them that help determine the presentation and pricing and selection of an upsell offer to the guest, to the end user. We have actually looked at including tours and activities. We actually purchased a company several years ago that was basically a tours and activities switch. But we found that hotels just weren't ready to cross-sell tours and activities. Like, they just didn't know how to do it. They didn't want to mess with it. They were far more interested in, of course, upselling their own stuff instead of somebody else's. And in the 4- and 5-star hotels, they had concierges who did not want to let some application, horn in on their out of underneath the table cash incentives they were getting from those third-party providers. So we haven't found a whole lot of take on that, but it's changing every day, just absolutely every day.
Yeah.
So, Stuart, I have a question for you. Since you were the advocate of bringing Alex on board, obviously
clearly that was a big mistake. I apologize.
Why on earth did you do that?
And I know that Ed has made himself clear as to why he appreciates Condo-World. So what was your? I mean, we found out the uniqueness of what Alex is doing. I mean, and everything that her team is doing and so forth. But you saw something different, or you saw something that was worthy of saying, "Hey, we need to talk about this." What is it? Have we already hit that, or is it something that?
Yeah, no, there was nothing specific. There was a couple of things that kind of prompted me to invite her on the show. I mean, one is, clearly she's demonstrated, she and Condo-World are very, very impressive as a group. They think differently. They do a lot of things really, really well. And I've gotten to know Alex personally. We serve on a couple of boards and committees together, so we know each other pretty well. She's got a decent sense of humor. I figured she'd fit. Mildly good sense of humor.
I think modest the last time.
Yeah.
Modest.
But it's also, this is a sector of our industry that we don't get to talk about a lot on the show, and I think a lot of people don't appreciate how, it exists and the complexities of it, dealing with homeowners, the different types of inventory. And, this is one of the reasons, and I always kind of give Robert a hard time whenever he puts an Airbnb article on the list. And it's not that I don't like Airbnb, I just don't like how the hotel industry is freaking out about anything Airbnb does and tries to copycat it, right? It's nonsense, because this category has existed for a long, long time. A lot of my clients are in that space. So I figured it would be a refreshing conversation. And it's happened, right? We've talked about how do they price, what the challenges are with the homeowners, the fact that, Alex isn't just marketing to one audience, the customer, she's also marketing to the homeowner. So no, I think you've checked most of the boxes that I've thought of before.
To just be nice, Stuart didn't fly off the handle when you talked about Airbnb, Alex.
Yeah. Because usually we mention the A word and soapbox, stamping, stomping, screaming. Anyway, Alex, I do have one question that came out of not fast enough to find it. Anyway, it was talking about Airbnb and how you're competing with the like what was brought up earlier, the hey, why do I need to do this with them when I can just do this with Airbnb, throw my inventory over there and say mess with it later and so forth. Are you seeing anything different in your comparisons to Airbnb? Is Airbnb getting better or worse then? Is it even not even a consideration? Because, some things like AirDNA have gone in and said, let's just rip all this data out and start trying to augment people's joining the Airbnb inventory. Are you worried that somebody's going to come in and say, hey, let's look at Condo-World and see what we can do about jumping on their data, ripping it out and using it to manipulate people to go over and inventory their product or something? Would anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I really spend very little time worrying about stuff like that, to be honest. I think what we do is unique, and I think we've kind of carved out a niche, and there's always going to be different competition coming into the market and things to worry about. But Airbnb has been huge for our industry in a lot of good ways, some not so good ways. It does kind of annoy me when my friends, and I find myself saying it sometimes just to be able to better describe it to somebody, that they stayed at an Airbnb. Okay, you stayed in a condo rental. We've been doing Airbnb for the last 35 years. There's nothing new about it. It's just a marketplace, right? So, but they've done a phenomenal job of giving a wider look at vacation rentals. And I mean, the vacation rental industry in the last 5 years is just booming. I mean, the amount of investment capital and people coming into it it's unreal. And that's because of Airbnb. But at the end of the day, one thing that we, talk to our partners about all the time is, all that capital coming in isn't necessarily a good thing. Because as we talked about earlier, the different tech companies that are coming in that are very well VC funded, they don't know our industry at all. And so they're coming at it from just a money and a tech side, that the things that they're developing really don't complement the way that we do business. And that's an inherently bad problem.
So Dan, do you think you got a whole new business model for Hawaii, that you're just going to start, talking to Alex about bringing Condo-World to Hawaii?
Yeah, we
junk?
Yeah. I want to go to Hawaii, so that's why we want to be there.
Dan's the man. Dan's the man on that one.
All of our destinations first.
It's definitely a market with lots and lots of inventory, but a lot of the companies, like I mentioned before, the big challenge is people think they can self-manage, and a lot of smaller companies pop up who will do it at a much cheaper split with the ownership groups. That's one of the challenges. But there are companies who are trying to do things like Condo-World to try to aggregate it and do a better job, where they have their own housekeeping company in one spot that can service multiple units and things like that.
Right.
I think it's a huge value proposition. The distribution part has gotten easier, but dealing with guest complaints, cleaning the units, making sure everything's done, ownership relationships, that part hasn't changed. It's still very, very difficult to do. I did have a question about one new, well, I guess they're not a new entry. They've been around a long time, but I think they're a new unicorn, a fairly new unicorn, is Vacasa. I mean, they seem to be trying to do this at scale now. What are your thoughts on that business?
Yeah, so we know them very well, and I think they've done an excellent job of being able to really leverage and scale their business by technology. They have their own proprietary system as well, and they've really been able to excel because of their revenue management and their distribution. So I mean, they've done similar things. We haven't quite gotten to the Vacasa level yet. Maybe next time that I'm on the podcast, we'll be there, but it might be a while. But they've done exactly what we've talked about, that they've used their own proprietary tech to build that runway for growth. And at the end of the day, I think the only worry there is, there needs to be differentiation in a market and across an industry. And they are buying so much inventory and so many companies that I think that gets a little bit, scary. I mean, we don't want all of vacation rentals to just be one brand. I don't think it'll ever be that way, but they're a major heavy hitter in the industry. To talk on the API issues and the challenges we've ran into, one of our larger partners, actually that Ed and his team connected me with, was Sterling Resorts, and they had probably about 600 units in Panama City, Destin, 30A in Florida, and we're a great partner of ours. And I got a call last March from my contact there, and he said, "Yeah, I've got big news. We were purchased by Vacasa." And wow. So, okay, well, what does that mean? For us, he's like, well, one, I'm probably not going to work for the company anymore, so I'm not sure, but you'll need to talk to them to continue that relationship. So we've talked to them, and perfect example, we really want to work with them. They really want to work with us, but they are developing their own API for people to write to, which is not done yet. So we're kind of in a holding mode to get that inventory back, which that was another one that when the swap was made, we lost 600 condos in Florida. So, that's a really scary thing to, have happen to you, and really can happen at any moment. But ultimately, we're waiting for that API, and we can't wait to work with them.
So Alex, question: when you guys are looking at markets for, like, you moved into Florida and so forth like that, are you looking for high density condo areas, or are you looking at the perspective of saying there's 2 or 3 in XYZ Colorado and 4 and 5 in Portland and 6 and 7 elsewhere?
Yeah, no, definitely. We want to have some good saturation in the destination. Okay. I think eventually you can get to the onesie twosies once your site is at a certain level that you just start typing in a destination and it just pops up. But for right now, we're still a set list of destinations. But we like to have a good spread of the, good mix of smaller and larger units and different budget sizes within an industry.
Well, and don't forget too, she's in these other markets. She's looking for well-managed properties. You're going to find a higher ability to identify well-managed properties in a more sophisticated market that has a lot of vacation rental product. Whereas a onesie twosie, there may only be one management company that manages, everything in a 50-mile radius. They may not be as good to work with.
Right.
So just flipping the coin from what the discussion is on the hotel side of Airbnb, which is, should I add inventory to Airbnb? Yeah. Has there been a thought on your side of saying, what about chasing down some of these smaller hotels that have the inventory type that we're looking for, that can do long-term stay opportunities and flip it into a hotel inventory availability on your platform?
So here locally, there's a couple resorts, or I guess you actually really call them hotels, that we've added that are straight 1-bedroom hotel type suites. And, I sometimes think we can rent anything on our platform. And I've been reminded that we can't. We are Condo-World. So, we really don't do that well on the hotel side. And it is funny too, because when I travel and my husband and I go places, we stay in hotels. We actually don't stay in vacation rentals. So, and maybe that's because we don't have kids, but to this point, we haven't had a reason to stay in vacation rentals. So I typically choose hotels, but there's some great properties in our area that I'd love to have on our platform, but we really cater to a specific type of traveler that's looking for the larger accommodations. And I think with Airbnb, I don't think that hotels are going to be a home run for them, because it's the same thing. It's a different kind of, you're just trying to make money on everything and anything versus what you really are is your core model, which, as we know, our core model is condos. So I think they'll realize that too.
And one interesting thing on Airbnb, though, and one of the articles that I threw in there was, Airbnb, the French courts were very, very tough on a lot of consumer protections and privacies and things like that. They reiterated Airbnb is a platform, right? Because that's it. They're a technology layer. They're kind of this logistical reservation. They don't have anything to do with property management or real estate or anything like that. And you mentioned Vacasa. You look at the bottom of their website, and there is just a laundry list of all of their licenses and where they're registered to do business. Those are really, really very, very different, very, very different business models. And I think the hotel industry kind of looks at it and just kind of goes, oh, well, that's just vacation rentals, and they don't really understand the nuances of the difference between like what a Condo-World would do versus a Vrbo versus an Airbnb and all these. So
I mean, we're not as there's a lot of tech companies coming to the market that they say this is just a completely fragmented industry, and that there was no tech side of it until a few years ago. That's not the case. I mean, the companies that are still around, like the Condo-Worlds and several in our market here and others, we've been doing some of these core operational and marketing things for years. we don't write our reservations down in a book. I mean, we have a property management system. We're not that archaic, but I read articles all the time that they make it seem like we've just been in the woods, and it's not exactly that bad.
Lauren, I have to drop off now, so I got to.
Thank you.
Very nice to meet you, Val. Thank you.
You too.
And we hope that you get to join us again. And if people want to know more about you or Nor1, where is it they can find you?
So nor1.com. You can find me on Twitter at Valen Perini. That's it.
Okay.
All right.
Val, thank you.
The only way to find her.
To see you again soon.
Yeah, and Robert and Ed always know where to find me.
Or she drums for the Rogues, which is also
That was 2 bands ago.
two bands. Oh,
All right.
see,
Forgive Robert.
Go.
His old
Bye.
mind is going.
exactly.
Robert's things are fading off. Anyways, we've kept you here, Alex, for an hour and a half. We asked you for only a half hour, and we sincerely appreciate all the time for it. I didn't know if there's anything left, any stone unturned that we wanted to make sure we didn't miss, or any of the questions that we didn't miss. I've gotten pretty much cumulatively what had come through. There was some very specific questions, but I think we aggregated them into some of our other questions, so I think we're okay for those. Anything that we didn't miss, or any closing things that we want to say with Alex before we try to take on one or two of Robert's efforts of topics?
I'd like to ask a question, if I may. Alex, what's the heheaviest suitcase you've ever taken on a plane?
Oh my God. Probably at least 65 pounds, I'd say. So when Stuart and I go to these conferences, it always ends up our travel plans coincide. And I'll come downstairs and I've got my suitcase and it's like as big as I am. I'm 5'3", and it's huge. And Stuart has this tiny little bag that we've been there for a week. And I'm like, I saw you change your outfits every day. Like, how did you pack that?
Efficient packer. So one time we were coming back from a conference, and I swear her bag doubled in size on from the way out to the way back. And literally they got there. There's going to be a slight overcharge for this. It was a $200 charge for her bag.
Yeah. Thank you, airlines.
Yeah, thank you for the.
Probably got you in trouble, Alex.
Yeah, probably.
Yes, because I do see Roy is on and watching the show.
Yeah.
No, wait.
But if he's watching, she did a great job at the conference and generated a lot more than $200 in business.
It was all business cards of prospective new
Right.
users.
Exactly.
It was all business cards. It was Chotskis and stuff. Yeah, it was cool. She had to lug it for work. Thanks, Stuart.
I have a question about the Myrtle Beach and neighborhood. I mean, do you have problems on Friday afternoons with inebriated fooligans roaming the streets and creating, havoc? And does that negatively impact your business? I guess.
Yeah, well, I have to pass their offers every day to and from work, but on Fridays I try to make sure that I go at least out of the hour block.
We have a reputation. What can I say?
I got in the mail this amazing for Christmas, this 12 Days of Christmas box that was, I thought, to the Fooligans, but it came from the Fooligans. And I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool.
It was pretty sweet. Yeah.
Wow.
That was a pretty good thing. Thank you very, very much for that. With that in mind, Alex, if they want to know more about you and Condo-World, where is it they can find you and Condo-World?
Yeah, so go to our website, it's condo-world.com, and you can see all the destinations that we have. If you are a resort or a rental company or a condo company that is interested in talking to us, you can go to condo-world.com/partners, or email me, Alex, ALEX, at condo-world.com. Also on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Although with LinkedIn, you have to be connected to them to see your profile. Because
I don't know.
When to set the show up, I went up to LinkedIn to find her picture to put it on, and it's like, well, there's no picture. So I started looking on the Google, and I picked a picture that I thought was her.
Right, similar. It wasn't me.
So Lauren, you know Stuart and I.
Yeah.
Well,
So why
I
would
try
you
to be
just
independent
say,
about
hey?
this. I try to not bother you guys about some of the mundane. So I was like, oh, this came up several times, so this must be her. And no one.
I mean, you could have always asked Alex, can you send me a headshot? I mean,
Right.
heaven forbid.
Imagine.
The one that you used today is correct. So
Yeah,
The irony is the one you picked was someone that we'll know.
That throws the logistics of doing the show, but no.
But
no,
Alex, you didn't also mention, how can people learn more about Beamer?
Oh my God.
Face it, that's all that matters.
Yeah, we as I mentioned, we don't have kids, but we do have 3 crazy dogs. We have 2 Boston Terriers and a Chihuahua. Beamer, who Ed has seen ridiculous amount of pictures that I have of him. He's a dog model, like he legit models. So he's quite beautiful. You might want to friend request me just to see his pictures. He's pretty stunning.
It's honestly the only reason I look at your social.
I know. He's a ham too. He knows he's beautiful, so it makes the picture taking even funnier. But
Oh yeah,
that's awesome. There he is.
yeah. I can see why.
Yeah.
Well, you're more than welcome. The invitation is always open for you to come back to the show whenever and however. That's how everybody eventually accumulated being on the show as hosts anyway. So you're always more than welcome to join whenever you'd like to for it going forward. And we'd love to have you back at any time that you want to join us. The other is if you'd like to hang around with us, I know we've already occupied an hour and a half of your time, but if you wanted to stay longer for us to kind of hit a couple of Robert's highlights, because he's now doing his curated list publicly, where we used to do it privately. To HSMAI's boards and councils, Robert is offering it publicly, and it's a very excellent curated list. And if we get the chance to hit a couple of the highlights, we don't want to miss that opportunity. So if you would love to hang around with us and chit chat about some of these things, I was going to turn it over to Robert to pick what his favorite topic of his choice would be today to start with.
And
Yeah, sure.
I never pick the topics. I provide the topics, and then you guys can pick.
Right. So I was going to say, wait, first of all, we need to celebrate the fact that Dan Waxman got up at an ungodly
time.
Why don't we let Dan
Okay.
pick the next topic?
And now,
He's like,
actually,
oh, crap. Thanks, Ed.
There he is.
Oh, hold on, sorry. You just woke me up there. I heard my name.
No pressure.
Yeah.
So I don't have a topic off the top of my head, but I was just looking at my phone a second ago, and did you guys follow Scott Galloway at all?
I do. Huge fan of Galloway, and actually now he has the podcast Pivot with Kara Swisher, which is great.
Yeah. So he has his art. I just noticed it today, and his article was, it was about OEO and how he feels they're the next WeWork. So
excellent.
And not necessarily a topic. It's just the one that was right in front of me, but it's a lot of talk about that recently.
Well, I think they very much could end up that way. I mean, if we talk about what WeWork didn't do as part of the opportunity of their scale, OYO could very well fall into that same type of trap if they don't build a core fundamental value beyond just kind of we're gluing everything together. So I don't think it's that out there to actually say that. At least for what's seen at this point, they do have the potential of ending up the next WeWork.
Well, yeah, common funding source too, and kind of the culture of how that stuff gets put. Actually, that kind of ties into a thing. I did instead of the articles, I did kind of a preamble just on like the close of the year. So basically, a lot of growth for the U.S. hotel industry, at least, has stalled out. Right. So for the year, occupancy was actually off about 0.2%. ADR was only up about 1.1%. So RevPAR increase was like under a percentage, right? 0.8%, which is not great at all, because obviously expenses are rising much faster, particularly labor for hotel groups and that. So that's putting a margin squeeze. But I thought a very interesting thing that came out was the Baird STR stock index, which happened to be up 6.1% in December, and was actually for major hotel brands up 40% this past year in 2019. And for the REITs was up 10%. So that averaged to a 30% increase in the valuation of those publicly held companies off of an industry predominantly U.S. based, which was up about 0.8%. At least.
So, Alex, we need to precursor you with Robert. Robert is the docent of hospitality, where he first started keeping records of statistics and data back when Sanskrit and mud tablets were working, and pretty much kept his own data source.
Once we developed an alphabet and kind of the whole numerical thing, it got so much easier.
I mean this is a complete compliment. There is nothing that can be stumping Robert when it comes to either the history of or the source of anything. And I mean that it's a genuine big compliment. He can come up with.
He is the
Yeah.
I mean, in a couple of 100 years, when we're his age, then we'll probably all have that. kind
To
of
be
knowledge.
fair, I mean,
Exactly.
He lived
one of the
it.
reasons
He was
why
there.
Yoda was so
Easy.
smart is he was 900 years old.
It's old.
So,
Exactly. And if Yoda said something, you couldn't really disprove it, right? Because you
Right.
go, I don't know.
I don't know, but Robert was really there. No, but to add your Oyo conversation, Dan, real quickly, is that, we talked about the technology stack. Is that one of the big key elements of Oyo's growth was the fact they walked in the door with everything connected. They boom, we walk in, you step out, we do, you just cash the checks. And to quote an old World War II line, they went past their supply lines. They went and grew so fast. They couldn't maintain their integrity of what their brand was supposed to be representing, nor to the scale that they were doing it. Plus, Calvin Anderson, when he was in charge of revenue management for them, was doing a lot of very unique dynamic rate strategies that were contra to most rate strategies, where he was actually lowering rate during high occupancy demands. He was expanding inventory in markets at the time when people were shutting down inventory and putting fences on. He was opening it to non-fenced stuff. And they were driven completely by occupancy at that point, which allowed them to quote cash to check. But what ended up happening from outside perception, not inside anymore, is that they weren't maintaining brand integrity or any brand identity to what they were doing. They're really just occupying inventory, and they were really just a contra to the inventory strategy within markets, which was creating them as being either the bottom dweller at best or the protagonist at worst. So. They are in a situation now. They either need to catch up with what they've promised or stop growing to where they can establish some sort of solidarity to their program as a recognized brand and not just a, scorch the earth kind of mentality, which they have been up to this point.
It's interesting. I mean, it seemed to work. I mean, is it a developing market model? Is it a model that could succeed in a mature market? I mean, in India, it made a lot of sense because you had a lot of these mom and pop operations who had no idea how to run things. You put a little bit of process around it and technology. It doesn't have to be the best, and it works well. But then you come into a mature market in Europe or the US, you need a lot more than you might need in those markets. I wonder if that's a limiting factor.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of independent, lower end. It's too bad Cat isn't on the unbranded properties. Some of these guys who never went with a Choice or Best Western or Wyndham or anything like that. That all of a sudden you bring in Oyo with the tech stack and everything like that, and they go, "Oh, this is great." Now, Oyo, in my opinion, has done one of the worst jobs on branding because people don't know the difference between their hotels and their townhouses, and it's just nonsensical. There's no differentiation in the logo, and they just kind of see it. So that's certainly going to create issues for them. But rolling up a lot of that kind of literally disenfranchised inventory is probably a good opportunity. But I don't think that satisfies the investment goals of SoftBank, right?
Well, no,
with
but you
all
also
the money that they have, that's a
much,
problem.
How much of that disenfranchised inventory that they've scooped up are disenfranchised for a reason? A reason that Oyo is also going to find.
A bunch of them didn't want to pay the fees. Yeah, they didn't want to pay the fees, right? Or they didn't meet brand standards and got popped out. So yeah, and that's certainly a case. But there is a point where very kind of that inexpensive tier where you can go, yeah, we're going to clean this up a little bit. Yeah, you got to meet some bare minimal standards and that sort of thing. And then there's some process around it. That's a very, very viable, that's a viable market, and there's a lot of product out there. But I don't think that satisfies the investment that SoftBank has made and what the returns they're expecting are. That's not
well. And from an IPO perspective, what's their endless growth strategy? Because from all I can see is as soon as they start talking about going IPO, you can draw lines to where their end of scale is. And so those types of IPOs don't do well. They don't do that giant pop and straight run because you can easily see where their scale endpoint is.
It's really interesting too. We were talking about Vacasa earlier. It's so similar, right? I mean, Vacasa has done a very similar thing to what Oyo has done, that they've gone around and try and pick up these mom and pop vacation rental companies that they don't want to keep up with where tech has gone in the industry. And they do come at it with the platform and the ability to do these things that they couldn't do. But even on the IPO side too, I mean, everybody, has been thinking that Vacasa was going to go for an IPO this year. I just recently listened to a podcast with their COO, and he said, that is not imminent. I mean, that is not necessarily where we're going to go, and for the same hurdles, I think that Oyo has. So,
yeah.
Well, it's tough. Where did I see that somebody pegged their valuation as somewhere as much as $10 billion?
Yeah.
How do you IPO that without hitting a crash?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the margins eventually, they don't really even out. So, it seems like looking at it from the outside that, okay, Oyo or Vacasa in this case are worth $10 billion. Well, do you realize what the margins are in vacation rentals? No, it's probably not.
Well, but even to Oyo, their price point is so low that their margins are low because of it. Even if they take a lion's share, they're taking a lion's share of a small transaction.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's problematic for sure.
Yeah.
Well, with that being
though, if you're charging $10, if your fee take is $10 and the ADR is $50, you got 20% margin. You might have a decent margin, but it's still not a lot of money.
See, that brings in the whole conversation again, like with Stephanie's perspective on branding and so forth, which, by the way, for people not to remember, we do this in support of HSMA as well. Stephanie has a piece to the puzzle onto the marketing conference coming up in New York in a couple of weeks, where she talks about the, was the right word saying deficiencies? Gap between what brand offers versus what hotel ownership has to do. Your choices that you're talking about, what you're doing with Condo-World, what you're doing with brands, or what brand is doing for their other ownerships and so forth, is actually the finalized question is like, how much value proposition is in the relationship that warrants what you're doing versus what you're getting, and then what margins does everybody get to share with that part? Because as Calibri Labs had pointed out, and has been a long discussion, it's a death of 1,000 cuts. All these channel distribution costs are slowly bleeding you in variations, and everybody has a small piece by themselves. Doesn't mean much, but by the time somebody goes to cash a check that owns the hotel or owns the distribution platform or what have you, that check's really small compared to all the amount of cost that went into the creation of its services. Right. So that's really the question it's coming down to, is where does that value proposition come in? That's why I think like data layering places like Happy and so forth have an interesting niche, because they can expand that value proposition. They can make things work that didn't work before, so you can take a more affordable option and combine it with another affordable option rather than being held hostage at a higher costed one that had those two components already there, but knew it and wanted to charge you for it. So,
yeah. But still, the challenge with Happy, and I'm a huge Happy fan, is that when you bolt all this stuff together, that's only part of it. That's kind of the plumbing, right? So the plumbing's now kind of, but you still have to operate. Conversion. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you then have to still run the business and then use those systems, effectively to do what you need to do. So there needs to be strategy wrapped around it, not just bolting it together. So
I have a question for Stuart about one of your articles that was misconnected by link. So I had to dig into it a little farther. The New York Times article on podcasts.
That was misconnected too?
Yes.
I think there was a problem with when I move things in order, that there's something within MailChimp that I've discovered that the basic link thing.
It could never ever be user error.
Never.
Yeah, no. It can't be between the keyboard and floor. Not when it comes to Robert.
I promise you, I was not sublinking different URLs under something that was visible as a URL.
There was two articles.
That would be too much effort.
That's way too much work. But Stuart,
that is way too much work.
Well, I didn't read that podcast article. So
okay, well, as the resident expert on podcasts, since you are the award-winning podcast fuel.
Oh yeah, Facebook is coming after you, Stuart. Yeah.
Okay. So the New York Times talked about the fact that Facebook is looking into creating platforms that are associated with categories such as travel. Mm-hmm. Do you see the value proposition in somebody talking about their destination?
Yeah, I think with a lot of people come to me and ask me about advice if they're starting a podcast. And the thing I think that made us successful and what makes a lot of things successful is you've got to start with the why in all things in life, but especially with a podcast. If you understand who you're trying to talk to and what value you're providing to them, then I think you can have a podcast on absolutely any subject you want, because it's such a niche opportunity to reach people that are seeking out your information. We've dabbled with it, honestly, in the Myrtle Beach destination, because one of the businesses we own operates myrtlebeach.com. So we've toyed with it. I think our local CVB is coming out with like a destination specific program. I don't know if they're going to be successful because I don't know if they've really thought through what is the purpose. But if you're passionate about something and you care about it, there are other people out there that care about it. And if you talk about it authentically, I think you can have success.
One thing first off, Stephanie and Dan, if you guys want to, well, Robert knows this already, but I have other platforms for podcasts that I already paid for that are just extra accounts. So if you ever want to flip on doing one, by all means. But I did back in 2004 when it was a challenge to download podcasts, where you had to take the file and download it and put it in an audio player that you probably also had to download to play the thing and so forth. But because I was running over all these hotels in Florida and North America and stuff, we did this quasi travel. Okay, but the first podcast it was called Save on Florida Travel. And what I did was I took the GMs and the salespeople from each of the hotels and talked about the destination, but not about the hotel. But of course, we only picked destinations we had hotels in. So it was about, being in such place, Florida, so forth and so on. And ironically, we got engagement with it, but we didn't really monetize it. We just were making this like an awareness thing, like, hey, come to Cape Coral or come to Sanibel or come to Tampa or whatever. And it was kind of fun. But now with the absolute ease of playing podcasts, 750,000 podcasts have been created according to Apple. And you know how this is a medium of communication. We want to try, like one of my clients in Vancouver, we want to try destination preparation podcasts that are timely, like as in not just generalization, oh, come to Vancouver, it's all pretty and all the sunny and all this, but rather by time segment, what you should be prepared to see. Like, hey, coming up is the Wine and Food Festival. And so, these are there's 88 locations, blah, blah, blah. This is what you should prepare for. Tickets at the bus are this much, so forth. Because the first reaction would be video medium. Like, hey, let's show you stuff.
Right.
That's the real good medium. Like, let's show you some good stuff. But more so, to your point, the podcast is a personal consumable. It's a voice in your head.
Yeah. There's a gut Phil in our team. He's our director of marketing services. He's really passionate about us, and we're trying to find a client that this makes sense to guinea pig. But he really thinks, and I agree with him, that there's an opportunity for properties, and it's got to be the right kind of property and the right kind of destination, to create a podcast series which is acclimating people to the property, what to expect, and to refresh that regularly, but to send it out to every guest before they arrive,
right.
like kind of an orientation packet for the destination, for the property, what's going on, the events and things like that. So it wouldn't be like a typical podcast in the way you think about, like a series of stuff that continues indefinitely. It would be a finite package that you refresh the content for. And people don't necessarily subscribe to it ongoing. They're just going to download and listen to the content, because audio as a medium, I think, has just become and will continue to grow in its importance, because a lot of us do it while we're exercising or cleaning the house or commuting or whatever. So I think it's a really unique, untapped medium, which is why we jumped on it a few years ago, because we felt like there wasn't a lot of competition, and we felt like we could be an early adopter to something. But now it's
with
mature,
that, I mean, the only thing I'd caution people on is they're looking at this, because all like that idea conjures up in my head are these god awful videos that play on loop in hotels. Weren't produced with anything except for a checklist. I think one of the important things about podcasts is the really good ones take whatever topic it is, and they also make it entertaining. So if you're going to think about adopting this as a hotel, you have to remember it should also be entertaining, which means it's not just about you, it's also about the listener. And so that would just be one important thing I'd kind of throw out there to keep in your head as you're weighing whether or not you're going to try this, is also remember, make it entertaining.
We really were very specific about that being important to us when we started ours. We knew we had to stand out, and we'd seen some people that had tried and failed, and one of the theories that we had, and we think we're right there, was we're competing against other opportunities to be entertained. People do want to be educated, but there's a reason that we're kind of silly on our show, and we have these little memes that go on throughout it, and we don't take ourselves seriously, because if people aren't laughing or enjoying what they're listening to, even if they're getting value out of it, they're probably not going to look to do that when they could do 1,000 other things at that time.
I think it depends on the content too, right? I mean, if you're talking about a specific resort as a podcast, if you're interviewing people, that makes sense. I mean, if you're interviewing somebody that's hosting, a local festival or a restaurant owner or something like that, that makes sense. I mean, I'm an avid podcast, audiobook person. I love consuming everything on audio, but I'm still kind of in the same camp in how I feel about voice search with tourism related things, that it's so visual that if I wanted, I'm trying to plan a vacation right now, and I don't know that I would want to listen to anything about the places I'm going. I want to see pictures. I want to watch videos. I don't know that I'd want to listen to things.
It has to be a combined package that if you're referring to things, it has to be discoverable for them. And that if they listen to the podcast, go, oh, wow, that's great. I want to remember that.
Yeah.
So I want to go to that restaurant. I want to go do that thing. It's in what you supply as a part of their relationship with you, or whatever you're supplying to them. I know that I've told you all this other story before, but my only Myrtle Beach story this goes years and years ago when I did the GPS stuff for getting people to Myrtle Beach for the hotel that we had there at the time. I did the tour on the GPS where we found that Cincinnati was the core feeder market for the time of year that nobody wanted to come to Myrtle Beach.
Right.
And so we were feeding them down, we were going to actually send them a GPS in the mail. That's how far back it goes. But they could also download it and as well. And it was a tour for them between where they were to get to their hotel, our hotel in Myrtle Beach, but they didn't miss anything along the way. And I made it kind of fun because I did the audio snips for what I was telling them was on the side. If they're really
that works because you're pairing audio with the visual too.
Yeah.
So that works.
So if they want to go see the biggest ball of twine that they're going to be driving by in 10 miles, I tell them a little bit something fun about it to make them want to either decide to do it or just to know that it's there. But to your point, it does have to be entertaining, but it has to be a value proposition. But also one thing I'll add to what you said, Ed, too, is that podcasts have to be forward moving. They can't be just static download what I recorded 6 months ago, because that's just mundane stuff that can be put on a website or something more simplistic that's easily digestible. This is active, sending something up because somebody's coming the first week of March.
Yeah.
That's more valuable because you're going to talk about what they should be doing in the first week of March when they come to your resort than it is welcome to, that's white noise.
Yeah.
And or to your point, replaying displays in the lobby. It's just generic information. So if you're going to do something like this moving forward, I think that's the real value proposition of podcasts. But I was just curious about what you thought about that, Stuart, because it is. It's because now also with us looking for a car these days, it has an Apple Play, Android, all that stuff makes podcasting a button.
Well,
and now you listen to what you want to listen to.
Honestly, I think no one else should create any more podcasts. We've got enough. Okay? I don't want any more podcasts.
Well, now that you're the award-winning podcast, I mean, even I was telling you, I was beating my chest about this. I restarted my podcast 5 weeks ago, and I have over 2,000 people now.
Yeah,
I mean, there is an audience.
It builds quick for sure.
Yeah, not up to your cellular numbers and so forth, but I can only hope and dream.
Yeah.
Well, but the thing with Facebook and the purpose of having that article is that Facebook's trying to develop to be the platform for content creators, right? And so the two things they were looking at, one was for podcasting and the other is a travel app, because they now see everyone's Instagramming these places and these things, and how can they get in on the monetization of that? And it's there is a lot of money in that whole influencer and how you sell that and how you transact. Yeah. They are looking at as a greenfield opportunity. So I would just say, watch out. Their new platform or their new ventures group. Yes, it can kill things quickly, but I think they will be trying to figure out how to make these things work.
Well, because they know what they are. They're one of
Exactly.
the best discovery platforms. They help people discover things. And what's interesting about them versus Google is they are passive discovery versus active discovery. You go to Google when you know what you're looking for.
Right.
On Facebook, you discover things by just kind of being there.
Yeah.
So while we're running close to being up to 2 hours, I don't want to take everybody.
Stephanie, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see. I was looking at the schedule here. Sorry.
No, I need to jump off. So I just wanted to, I think a lot of people here today are going to be at HSMAI in a week and a half. So I just want to say, hope to see you all in person there. And if you want to hit me up on LinkedIn and Stephanie Sparks Smith or cogwellmarketing.com, I will look forward to seeing you on one of those places. So
we will see you then. Stephanie, thank you for your time today. Sincerely appreciate it. We'll see you in a week and a half. Well, hopefully next week.
I am also gonna hop off, guys.
Yeah, me too,
but-
because I won't get to eat lunch if I don't.
Yeah, and I've got a call with Ed in like an hour, so.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to prep for
mentally
that. That takes an
prepare for
hour
that,
just
for
to get
sure.
ready for the mental
Yeah.
duress.
Yeah. You guys don't want to have your discussion about Flip 2 online in front of everyone?
Yeah, we should.
Actually,
You should just have your call now. In front of the audience.
talking about data on our next
Yeah.
call. Thank you.
Alex, again, I know we asked you earlier, but if you could recount again how people get in contact with you and Condo-World, where is it they can find you?
Yeah, our website is condo-world.com. You can also go to condo-world.com/partners if you are an interested condo resort property that wants to work with us. My email is Alex, ALEX, @condo-world.com. Would love to talk about anything related to the vacation rental, condo, hospitality space. So thank you guys so much for having me today. This was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed the conversation. So
You have to
Thank
come
you very
back.
much, guys. Hopefully we can have you back again, and you're welcome anytime you'd like to join us.
Hey, Alex, aren't you give me on a panel and an upcoming show or something too? You want to plug that?
So this is a big month for me. I've never been on a video podcast before. I've never been on any podcast. I'm gonna be on Fuel, the #1 hotel marketing podcast
Nice.
in the world. I'm gonna be on theirs fairly soon, talking about what hotels can learn from vacation rentals, and been working on the topic for a while now. And I think we've got some pretty good content, so I'm excited.
Cool.
And
Awesome.
Stuart's gonna Stuart and the Fueligans drink beer during this, and Stuart knows I prefer wine, so he said he would buy me some wine for it. So I'm pretty
Thanks for the reminder. I totally forgot.
If it's far enough in the
Wow.
future, I think Stuart should make some wine. Since
Yeah.
Stuart was here.
There we go.
Come on, man.
It's really good.
I don't know if we'll have time, but yeah, we'll see.
as long as
Well,
I
thank
Thank you very much, Alex.
as long as
Thanks
I
for
get
your
my
time
suitcase in
today.
the door, I'm good. Bye guys. See you.
Bye, Alex. Thank you.
See you.
And where is it people can find you, sir?